much. About to do the report for the Aquarius full moon. A little late on the report. And the Mayan 13-day period of dog that we're just finishing up. Maybe I'll even use this for the next report. This is going to do a report for the Mayan 13-day period of house. And a lot of other stuff coming up. But these are a couple of bald eagles that are sitting up in this tree up here. And I can't quite get a good shot of their face, but I thought it'd be kind of cool to add to the report, so. Look at that guy. Oh, he is so beautiful. He looks thirsty. I think he knows that I'm talking about him too. That's alright. Alright, hello everybody. I'm going to do a shorter video since I'm a little bit late. My name is Billy Kyle. And this report is going to be centered around this recent Aquarius full moon. And we're completing the Mayan 13-day period of dog, so I want to talk about that. And then I'm going to do a completely separate report that's a little more current and that's involves the upcoming Mayan 13-day period of house. So first, I just want to jump in and some of the topics that surround the energies of going on right now have to do with death and have to do with illusions, the painful letting go of certain illusions that you have in your life or stories that you've created, as well as the pleasurable creation of new illusions, writing new chapters in your life. And part of that theme that I wanted to bring in was the destruction of old ideas and illusions. And I wanted to bring up the topic, a lot of people are talking about patriarchy nowadays. It's a lot more common of a topic than it was even, say, 5 years ago. But, and the idea is that, a lot of people focus just on, say, like political figures or, white, masculine or male figures. But the idea is that the patriarchy it's actually like, it's just consciousness. It's a particular kind of consciousness or a wavelength or frequency of consciousness. And, it was a really sad story I read yesterday. It was a news story. And I try to stay away from a lot of mainstream news, but, I read this story that was about India, and it was about a family. The males in the family basically murdered, killed their 17-year-old daughter or relative or however they were connected for simply wearing a pair of jeans. She liked to wear jeans and, tennis shoes, modern wear. And, this is something that we forget, especially in the West, how strong that consciousness, which is the true representation of something such as patriarchy, still holds so strong in different parts of the world. And, part of this energy right now, especially, we have this full moon in Aquarius highlighting these aspects. It's the aspect of liberty, freedom, autonomy. And then it also brings in, the ideas of relationship. It brings in the idea of loyalty and devotion and ideals and reaching for something bigger and better than what our current world is offering. And it's also the idea that, it's not just sort of a passive thing. We actually create the world. And so just imagine if everybody made different decisions on how to view the world and approach the world, how many things that we could change for the better. Especially, I'm talking about this idea of there's no reason that women or any minorities should be, being persecuted, killed, murdered. It was just such a brutal story, and that kind of stuff is prevalent. And, if we look at the Middle Eastern part of the world, that's sort of it's looked upon as sort of the center. It's kind of where civilization started, and it's kind of like, in a sense, the world tree. And everything from that center and that Middle Eastern area branches out from there. And so that center, that's sort of that conservative Saturnian center that holds on to a lot of the past and a lot of those archaic ideas that are completely unwilling to budge, to the point where they're willing to, murder a 17-year-old woman simply because she wore jeans. And, these are a lot of the things that we have to bring into the light of consciousness and work out. And these are topics that are sensitive because these old archaic belief systems are willing to do such horrendous things to fight in the name of those beliefs. And so we need to not engage it in the same way that they would engage it, in a warlike fashion. That's the lower nature of Mars. But to find the higher nature of Mars in the sense of ways to communicate new ideas in safe, pleasant ways that can sort of like reach people that are holding on to old archaic belief systems. So let me dive into this really quick. I'm kind of going off a little bit on that, but it's kind of part of the theme. This new moon that just happened back on the 9th of July, it was conjunct the fixed star of Wasat, and that's in the right arm of the northern twin Castor, and then it falls in the same area as the middle section of the waist area of Pollux. So those are the twins of Gemini, and basically that comes to an area of the meaning of the middle, or it's the topic of kind of the center or the middle way, and that's kind of that falls in line with a lot of like Buddhism beliefs. And that middle way is very important because it denotes that one does not fall to one side or the other, to one extreme or the other. One stays in that center kind of like path. And that's sort of likened to the idea of walking, well, you've heard of the straight and narrow, but this path is not so straight, but it's definitely narrow. And it's kind of akin to the idea of the razor's edge. And it's the idea that it's so much more challenging, but so much more greatness can come from walking that razor's edge, because it's absolutely one of the easiest things in the world to simply, by default, fall to one side or fall to one of the other sides. The challenge is really walking that tightrope or walking that razor's edge and having to hold just this, pure focus and intention so that one doesn't fall to either side. And so, that's part of the energy of what's going on right now, and it's the idea of the aim of our mortal self to rediscover our immortal self. Or another way of saying it is the aim of our mortal self to walk the middle way, which leads to the immortal self. And in a sense, that's talking about, the integration of our personality nature with our soul nature, which is definitely something that everybody's going through in one way or another. So this Aquarius full moon that happened recently on the 23rd of July at 1 degrees 26 minutes of Aquarius, it happened in the chart right between Saturn, which was at the time 10 degrees of Aquarius, and Pluto at 25 degrees of Capricorn. And then of course we have that Pluto squaring Eris. That's kind of another direction we can go, but some of the other aspects at that time was that the Sun was still opposing Pluto. So it's, building a lot of tension. And as we'll see when we get here in a second into the Mayan 13-day period of Dog, that tension is directly related to, it's an existential tension or existential crisis. And crisis, well, there is really truly no crisis, but crisis, the definition means coming to the culmination point where an extremely important decision has to be made, because it's the point in the process of dis-ease or illness, where one either recovers from that point or they don't, and it goes in the negative direction. So this is it's a very intense time. There's a lot of interesting aspects and oppositions and squares going on that make it to where we're being pushed existentially to make decisions that are huge. And I'll get more into that in a second with the 13-day period, Mayan 13-day period of the dog. But this Aquarius full moon was conjunct the fixed star of Sham, which translates as arrow, and that's in the constellation of Sagitta, which represents the arrow with which Hercules slew the eagle Aquila, and that bird, that eagle Aquila, is what fed upon the liver of Prometheus as he was like bound or chained upon the mountain, basically imprisoned for stealing fire and giving it to humanity, stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humanity. So, that goes back into what we kind of started with there, was the theft of fire is the theft of new ideas that are cresting on the kind of the shores of humanity's like ideals that we want to bring into the present world, into the present moment. And doing that is a huge challenge because humanity is governed by inertia, and it's very resistant to new ideas. It's very safe to hold on to old, archaic, outdated beliefs. So in order to do that, we have to summon a lot of like courage, a lot of Aries-like courage or Scorpionic-like courage, and a lot of aspiration, that's Sagittarius. And the arrow that Hercules used in many of the stories is the arrows of aspiration. So right now that's kind of the challenge, is to not only gather the arrows of aspiration, but use them. And when we do, that's sort of where it kind of wakes us up to the battlefield of Scorpio in a way. It kind of wakes up the shadow, it wakes up the dragon. Ironically, I'm out here in this graveyard today. I thought it was sort of fitting with the theme, and there are a couple of eagles, bald eagles, that are out in the trees over here, which are absolutely beautiful, and you might kind of hear them in the background. So, that's that kind of energy, bringing these new ideas forward to humanity, the pain that humanity goes through to accept these new ideas and find new solutions to old problems and systems that are outdated. So moving on, we had the Venus conjunct Mars in Leo. So that kind of sets a completely new tone, as Venus and Mars have been making conjunctions in the mutable sign of Virgo since about 2015. So, this sets a completely new tone, a very leonine tone. And Leo has very much to do with the sun, the center, the king, that which all else revolves around. It's the power source, the solar power source. And the sun, if you ever get into any of the esoteric rays, and I'll talk about them more and more in my videos, but the sun is, I guess I would say the word dominated, but most highly influenced by the second ray of love and wisdom. And so our whole entire solar system is predominantly biased towards the second ray of love and wisdom. And so I feel that this new conjunction of Mars and Venus in the sign of Leo will definitely bring more of a union. And just the fact that it was a conjunction has to do with merging, it has to do with orgasm, it has to do with sex, it has to do with union. Yoga means union. So, it's finding a balance between not only our relationships with our partners and our friends and so forth, but it's also the relationship that we cultivate that's inner. That's part of why I refer to my astrology as the inner revolution, or inner revolutionary astrology, is because in this sense, we're talking about the masculine and the feminine. we have our own inner masculine and feminine to balance and to nurture and to respect and to give room to grow and breathe. So sometimes when those get out of balance, that's when we have a lot of issues. So we're not going to have another Mars-Venus conjunction in Leo until September 7th, 2028. So this kind of sets a tone for right now for us to come into our center, to let go of self-consciousness. The sign before Leo is Cancer, which is very inclusive, and it's very careful about the moves it makes. It's the security access, Cancer and Capricorn, and it's very, there can be a lot of fear and conditioning and the want to go along with societal conditioning, and there's a fear to step outside those boundaries. Well, this is going to change that. It's going to help change that and sort of urge people to be their own true unique self and sort of step out, let go of that self-consciousness that wants to, it's a self-judgment. We make these stories up in our heads that certain things are certain ways, and 99.9% of the time, the things we fear and the stories that we create in our minds aren't real or never come to pass. And so this is definitely something that will help create more of a balance with that, urging people to bring themselves forward, and instead of being self-conscious or shy, to turn shy into shine like the sun. So to shine like the sun, that's a term that I got from was his name Robert Stevens Tennyson. He wrote the book Conscious Language, and he's coming out with a new book, Sacred Body Language, which I'm very interested in reading when I get it. So moving on, we started the 13-day period of Dog on July 17th, and it goes till the 29th. So that is that's tomorrow is the last day of the 13-day period. So the last time we were in this 13-day period was October 30th, 2020 to November 11th, 2020. And that occurred with the United States presidential election. And one of the topics that I mentioned, or the themes for this 13-day period, is the creation and destruction of illusion. And we definitely saw that in a very strong way the last time we were in this 13-day period with the United States presidential election. It doesn't really matter to me one way or the other who you voted for, what bias you lean towards. It's just simply that society on some level, on some layer, made the decision for a particular great change, and that's what occurred. Because, it's the idea that leaders on supposed higher levels are representative. They're sort of beacons or symbols or representations of the mass consciousness for the collective. Now, I'm not going to get into any of that stuff about the election, but I'm going to stick with the theme about creating and destruction of illusions. And it's the idea that in order to create new illusions in your life, to write new chapters, to write new stories, and to go into new areas, territories, foreign lands, whether that's physical, emotional, in relationships, or in the mind itself, if you're an artist, if you're a writer, is that you have to destroy certain illusions to make room. It's kind of like the idea of memory in a computer. There's a defrag process, and then there's when you format the memory, or you wipe it clean. Well, I'm not talking about wiping the whole thing clean. I'm just saying that in order to make room for new stories, new chapters, new illusions, you have to let go of old ones. And so that's part of the process right now, and what that can do. And you may be feeling this over the last couple weeks, and still currently, sort of the identity crisis, or identity coming to the forefront, because when you create illusions, a lot of times what happens is people identify with them. It's sort of a natural inertia kind of thing, to identify with that which you create. And when that happens, we become attached to those things, whether it's a piece of art that you created, or music, or it's a person that you love, or it's a lifestyle that you live, or a place that you go. You become attached to those illusions or patterns. And patterns, all of this is basically, they're just forms that create particular sensations or appearances. So they're illusions. So this whole period is, it pits us between the painful letting go of illusions and the pleasurable creating of new illusions as we move forward. There's elements of fantasy, elements of love, elements of war, and I think, as I mentioned earlier, there's elements of devotion. On a negative side, there can be elements, the opposite of a lot of those things, which would be disloyalty, or not having integrity, not coming through, not being loyal. So this is also a time to remember the dead. So that's why I've come out to this graveyard. It's a time to honor, respect, remember the dead. You may have gone through something over the past week to 2 weeks where kind of a retrograde moment where you remembered people of the past, or you honored somebody of the past that was in your life that might not be any longer. Maybe you had to deal with deaths in the family or something of that nature. But it's having respect for the progress of those who came before and devoted their living energy to things of greatness. And it's remembering that and using it not as something that we should necessarily copy, but something that we should use as sort of like a guidepost or a parameter to guide us into the future, sort of a model in a sense. So there's highlights here of Chiron. Chiron's in Aries right now. Chiron just stationed and went retrograde. I'm sorry, what is it at? Chiron stationed and went retrograde at 12 degrees Aries, and it's going to stay at that 12th degree all the way until the 1st of August. Is that right? Maybe the 1st of September. It's there for a little while. So this brings up, ideas of, this whole 13-day period has to do with humanity, being human, being in the middle between the animal kingdom and the higher angelic or spiritual kingdoms. And it brings up the idea of suffering, which is very unique to humanity or the human. It's the idea that we can suffer from something that happened 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago, and we still carry that with us, trauma. We still hold that kind of thing with us. And it basically is what causes suffering, whether it's psychological, emotional, and then eventually turns physical. We also, as humans, suffer from that which has not even occurred yet. We suffer from the stories that we create and the illusions that we attach to. That's when we go into flight or fight mode, survival mode, because of how we're interpreting the future could happen. Are you going to have enough money to pay the rent? Are you going to have enough money for food, et cetera, et cetera? And so we go into that stress, and we go into that suffering in that sense. So it's the struggle of the human nature to deal with our lower selves, our animal nature, and suffering that can come with it, and the lack of control over our faculties of mind and emotion and physical body, and the striving to bring our evolution and focus upwards to something greater and something higher. And this whole theme reminds me of the movie Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I remember my friend's father, his name was Larry. He showed me that movie when I was first 17, 18, something like that. I think I was on acid. And this is not a recommendation for anybody to go take acid and watch the movie. But, it clicked with me because the whole movie is about the creating and destroying of illusion. And I don't know if you've seen the movie. It was written by Edward Albee, and it's not just a movie, it's been done in plays, but it's all centered around, well, you go watch the movie, you'll find out, but it's centered around the child, their child, and it's never really told whether this child is real or fictitious until the end of the movie. But one of the great lines toward the end of the movie is they're talking about truth and illusion, because there was a lot of confusion around the topic, and it was basically stated that most of the time we do not know the difference between truth and illusion, yet we must carry on as if we did. And I always thought that was really important, because we live our lives between the reality, man-made structures, Sagittarius, Capricorn. Sagittarius is the beliefs, and then Capricorn is the solidification and crystallization of those structures into a whole or society. And all the, asphyxiation, suffocation, restrictions, bureaucracy, authority, red tape that comes along with that. And then there's the other aspect, where we live as creators, artists, the creators of illusions, instead of suffering the illusions that we've created. So, it branches off into different directions, but I think that's really important, that right now is a time, and this energy will continue into the next 13-day period, especially with some of the aspects coming up, where it is absolutely crucial that you do whatever technologies you can, whether it's breath work or yoga, meditation, educating yourself in the higher mind, studying and so forth, to remain in a place of joy where the path forward in your life that you're creating actually comes from where you really want to put your living energy and your focus, like what you really want to create and focus on. So focus on what you want, not what you don't want. And you'll know what I mean, because the more aware you become, the more you will notice in every moment how the mind can take you out of your center or out of your focus of what you really want to be focusing on and putting your energy into. Well, the mind will distract you every 5-10 seconds. And if it's not you, it's almost sometimes as if the universe is conspiring against you, which it's not, because the universe loves you. But there's a challenge there, and that challenge actually is Saturn. If anybody wants to conspire against you, it's Saturn. But it's not because Saturn is malevolent or, evil, like it's been associated with Satan. It's because Saturn actually, it's all out of love. And it's just the tough love, the parental tough love. Saturn wants to test you, and Saturn wants to see you grow. So right now, that's your challenge, is to continue to focus, no matter what the circumstances, whether they're intense or lots of little things, is to stay focused on what you want and actually create what you want. Remember, basically, a feeling of centeredness, tranquility, or joy, and be that wherever you go, and bring it with you wherever you go. So I'm thinking of the image that we are like a fire burning in the darkness, or a flickering torch in the night. And in a sense, that's what we are spiritually and materially. Spiritually, we are humans having a spiritual experience. And, we are existing against astronomical odds. It's miraculous that we're actually alive and experiencing what we are here, despite the insane potential, random disorder of the universe. I think that there's actually a lot of organization to the universe. It's just sometimes we can't see it because we're in it. We're kind of like the fish in the water. But it's the idea that as we evolve, we kind of zigzag, kind of like a lightning bolt, between various extremes and stages of illusion as we evolve through our life. So it's the idea that when we repress or refuse to acknowledge our shadow, basically our dark side, this is the stuff that people basically don't want to like focus, look at, fuck with, because it's either challenging, it's too dark, it's too heavy, whatever the fuck it is. And people basically do anything they can to get away from it, whether it's directly avoiding it, geographical relocation, running away from your problems, using substances to numb it out. And so it's the idea of facing the shadow. And, it's the idea that when we repress things, we may be potentially repressing our animal instincts, which can be very important. And we also may be repressing as well our spiritual potential and responsibility. So basically, one way we can suppress the feral and the violent natures that we have and the darker aspects of our lower nature, which we actually need to come into more awareness around. And on the other end, we can actually block out and repress spiritual growth and the transcendent. So the idea is to sort of open the doors in both directions, and it's part of the story of Hercules, and the way he defeated the Hydra was to actually reach down and lift the Hydra on the earth and held it up into the light. And that's just basically holding it up, the lower nature, up into the light of consciousness, because that Hydra or that dragon actually represents our own inner duality and our inner darkness. So, have I covered enough? All right. Beautiful graveyard report. So, I am off now to do my second video on the next 13-day period and the current aspects. So, much love to you. My name is Billy Kyle. Like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you soon.